All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all for coming to today's Ask the Expert. Our topic today is the invisible sibling, family dynamics and the challenge of meeting everyone's needs. Before we begin, I just have a few things to go over. This will be recorded and we will send it to everybody afterwards. We love to take questions throughout, so please feel free to ask your questions in the chat and I'll be monitoring that. We will have some time at the end, hopefully, as well, to have a little bit of a Q&A. We ask that you stay muted through the presentation. Again, everything should be through the chat. And then if you have any ideas also for future topics, let us know. Without further ado, I will go ahead and introduce our speaker today. Well, first of all, my name is Julianne. I am the Director of Outreach at the Chesapeake Center. So I enjoy putting these on, and I'm so grateful for our providers for doing this. And I am here today with Karen Hennessy. Karen is our psychiatric nurse practitioner. She is dual board certified in psychiatry and pediatric and adolescent primary care. She's worked with children, adolescents, young adults, and parents for over 30 years. She received her master's degree in pediatric adolescent primary care at the University of Maryland, followed by a fellowship at St. Jude Children's Cancer Hospital. She later received a postmaster's degree as a psychiatric and mental health nurse practitioner at the University of Cincinnati. Ms. Hennessy worked in pediatric oncology at the NIH and at Georgetown University Hospital, where she also developed an interest in ADHD and learning disorders. She feels strongly that childhood illness in any domain impacts the family as a whole, and that effective treatment involves strong support and education for both patient and family members. Thank you again, Karen. I will go ahead and pass this over to you.
Okay, good afternoon, Julianne, and welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to hear this. So I'm going to start and say, why are we talking about the invisible sibling? I think it's probably a subject that we don't talk about as much as we should. A family, by definition, is a complex system just to begin with. Any disruption or challenge in that family system is going to affect everyone, and especially anything that occurs on an ongoing trajectory. Our practice specializes in ADHD and other learning disabilities, but this topic around sibling really applies to any chronic condition, whether it is a learning disability or a medical issue or a mental health condition. My training and evidence-based research always guides my clinical decision making. But first and foremost, I am also a parent, and 2 out of 3 of my children have had various chronic conditions. And growing up, I also felt that I was an invisible sibling, though I didn't know or understand why I felt that way over the years about my older sister's serious medical condition. But what I have come to learn is that oftentimes it is these real experiences, life experiences, that give us the best perspective as clinician and the insight that we can offer the families and the patients that we take care of. Okay. Sorry, we're having a little technical difficulty here in advancing the screen. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. So I want to start for a few minutes on a general level, just talking about parenting. And while this statement here seems very simple, it speaks a strong reality, and that is parenting is hard. And it's okay to say that. It doesn't mean that we don't love our children or that we would stop doing anything that we could for their happiness and well-being. But parenting is hard because of so many variables, some that we can control and many that we can't. And I'm sure that many of us looking at this could relate to at least one of these quotes or at least one of these cartoons. And it's okay to say that too. So to give us some perspective, let's look at what family life and just our world in general, how much it's changed, and what our society looked like almost 25 years ago in 2000. So it's hard to believe some of this when we think of where we are today. But Facebook had not yet been created. Google was still a baby. Books were still the most popular medium for reading. Point and shoot cameras were the rage. Marijuana use was actually on a downward trend, and it was pre 9/11. So the war on terror had not yet started. And of course, we had not experienced COVID. What does it mean now to raise children in the 21st century? So here are some of the issues that we deal with as parents. Social media, gender confusion, drugs and alcohol, screen addiction, opioid epidemic, increased suicide rates, and very high escalating college costs. So, just to give a little bit of statistic and perspective on this, we know that social media has changed the face of communication for our children. It's supported by research. Documentaries have been done on this, two in particular, one called Social Dilemma and the other called Social Studies. Shows how social media platforms actually use algorithms to engage users in ways that can negatively affect their mental health. They also highlight the link between excessive social media usage and increased anxiety, depression, and body image in young people. In terms of marijuana and vaping use, currently 1.63 million students use e-cigarettes. That includes about 4% of middle school students and almost 8% of high school students. Based on the CDC's 2023 Youth Risk Behavior Survey, suicide was the third leading cause of death in high school students between the ages of 14 and 18. 20.4% reported seriously considering attempting suicide, and almost 10% had actually attempted it. And these are the social norms in 2024. Children gauge their self-worth and their successes in likes, loves, favorites, selfies, and retweets. Average is no longer an option. We live in a world where everyone is gifted and talented. Technology and social media have transformed our society, how we communicate, engage with each other, are entertained, and how we do business. There's no firm line anymore between the real world and the internet. And this is our children know no other type of world. So this is all what it means to be a parent now in 2024. And some of the many reasons why parenting is so hard. We're navigating to keep up or at least keep somewhat afloat with a constantly changing technical world that exposes our children to anything and everything while we're trying to keep up with that and set realistic and appropriate limits. This is on top of our typical day where we're juggling our own jobs, getting kids to school with lunches, finished homework, getting them to activities, going grocery shopping, getting home from our own stressful day, getting dinner on the table, checking in with everyone, and then getting ready for the next day, where we begin the hecticness all over again. So, in these few short slides, I briefly then discussed parenting issues and what we're dealing with in our current world. Now we're going to add another complex layer to that hectic day and to our lives in general, and that is the challenge of having a child with any sort of chronic condition or special need. Now, before we get into that, we're just going to switch gears a second so that we get a little bit of the sibling perspective, okay? And we're going to talk about the sibling relationship. So these pictures depict both sides of a very realistic coin about the relationship between siblings. There's on the one side, we have the love hate, get away from me at any minute, and then the best friend at the next slide. But no matter what that relationship looks like or how it changes over the years, research supports how powerful this relationship is. Siblings are influencers. And there is a strong and unique bond in that shared history of growing up together, in the memories, in the understanding of family quirks, family stories, relatives, all of it. Siblings are the building blocks of family structure, and they are key players in the dynamics of the family system. For all of us with siblings, we can look back to our childhood and think of a lot of stories, both good and bad. But like it or not, siblings are how children first learn about getting along with others. They're our first peer group. They're our first playmates. They're our role models. They are the people that we compare ourselves to and the people that we first compete with. So, what do siblings learn from each other and what do they learn about conflict? So, There is benefit to the relationship. Now, your children may doubt this, and maybe at different times we've all doubted this, but it actually is true. And even if you grew up disliking your brother or sister, they were great teachers and they helped you prepared for the harsh world of reality. These relationships are opportunities for social and cognitive growth. Now, why is that? Well, siblings give us perspective. This is another person that thinks differently than I do or approaches a situation differently. They help each other to understand feelings and emotions. We learn to persuade and negotiate for what we want and to problem solve when there's conflict and disagreement. Siblings learn the very important lesson: the world does not revolve around them because someone else is there reminding them that it doesn't revolve around them. And all these skills and lessons that we learn from the sibling relationship gives us a broader experience of social competence, emotional depth, and peer relations. So now that we've touched on the challenges of parenting in general, and then the important connection of sibling relationships, we are now going to add this other layer. We're going to look at what happens to family dynamics in the context of any sort of chronic diagnosis in one child, or sometimes maybe more than one in a family. Julianne, any questions?
Not yet. I'll give you those.
Okay. So, our natural instinct as a parent is to protect. No one wants their child to struggle. And so we go into high action mode, or as my children used to tell me, the mama bear mode, when there's anything that threatens the physical, emotional, or developmental well being of our child. It is completely natural that our energy and attention goes towards addressing and trying to fix whatever the issue is. There is that expression that I'm sure many of us have heard, that a parent is only as happy as their least happy child. Well, they're also only as worried as their most worrisome child. When a parent is given any type of diagnosis, we experience a very appropriate and normal myriad of symptoms. And these are just some of the examples. We are worried and we're scared because anything that challenges the health and welfare of our children is going to cause us to feel that way. We're tired. Chronic component can be exhausting at times. There's also a grief response because there may have to be a change in expectation of what we thought that child's life was going to be and what the challenges that they're going to have to face. Sometimes there is the loss of a dream and a reshaping and readjustment of what that new reality is going to look like for them. This is a continuing process that changes as that child grows and develops and more reality takes shape. But this can be really painful for us as parents. Sometimes the people around us don't always understand that, and especially if the people around us all have healthy children that don't have any struggles. Parenting a child with any chronic condition can be a lonely journey. There's also the financial stress, medical expenses, mental health treatment with therapists, medication, learning disabilities with testing, tutoring, coaching. This adds up. Costs can be astronomical. Studies also show that chronic illness places great stress on marriage and relationships. Human beings are all different, and we deal with stress and reality in many different ways, and they don't always jive together. And at a time, sometimes when you need to support each other the most, parents are often at odds. And lastly, there's just the logistical stress, okay? The constant juggling of specialists and making appointments and getting to appointments and rearranging your schedule and rearranging your child's schedule. This is often a full-time job in and of itself. And all of these factors impact your emotions, your reactions, and therefore the family system. So then how do siblings react to all this? Well, children at any age are people too. And they're also going to have a myriad of emotions that are also normal and appropriate. Their developmental age and their maturity play a significant role in these feelings as well. They may feel anger at you, they may feel anger at their sibling for the disruption or change in the family structure. And then they're going to feel guilt for feeling that anger. They may feel resentment and jealousy for the attention that their brother or sister receives, and don't feel that they're getting that. They may feel sadness for that sibling, sadness at what they're going through, sadness for their parents who are worried and scared, sadness that their home doesn't quite feel the same anymore. I remember when every time my sister got sick and had to go to the hospital, our house just felt dark, even in broad daylight. And I remember feeling that stress and pit in my stomach, even as a little girl. And I just wanted everything to be back to normal again. Sometimes siblings can be embarrassed by their brother and sister, especially in front of their peers, if their brother and sister acts out or appears different in some way. And children of all ages can feel confusion. Why is this happening to my family, not to my friend's family? And finally, children worry about their sibling, their parents, about what might happen. Uncertainty always brings on worry. They often feel a need to protect their sibling from peers who may be cruel, from anything that may be hard or challenging for their sibling. And they feel the need to protect their parent or parents as well. They see your stress and they want to make it better. Some children feel that they are responsible for making you happy and that this leads to a feeling of them needing to be perfect. And we're going to talk about this a bit later on. So, what are the factors that impact a sibling in these types of situations that tend to be more influential? So, chronic nature and longevity. Chronicity takes a toll, and the longer that any situation infiltrates into family dynamics, the more complex it gets and the harder it's going to be for the family. Level of disruption in the family. So, how much of that is going on? Are vacations or family outings missed out on or canceled? Or one or both parents may be unable to attend the siblings' activities? Does the sibling have to give up something because they have to help out at home? Are there financial constraints that interfere with things? And or is there more fighting that's going on at home? How much do they take on the stress that they know that their parents are feeling as well? A lot does depend on developmental age. Younger children tend to act out. You'll see more tantrums, crying, misbehaving. Attention is attention, and children are going to find a way to get it one way or another, whether it's negatively or positively. You're going to see different thing in your adolescents and teenagers. They may withdraw, isolate themselves. They may find that it's easier to talk to their friends than it is to talk to you. And of course, individual personalities are always going to play into this. Our children are their own unique selves, and some of them are more flexible, easygoing, and are able to more to go with the flow. And others are more sensitive, reactive, and fearful. So this is going to all impact the family dynamics. So now we're going to look a little bit at the research. And there isn't a whole lot of research on the effects of on siblings of children with chronic illness, but there's enough that the studies that I chose to talk about actually impact how maybe we as parents can intervene to help our children. So the earliest literature on the effects of chronic conditions on siblings actually began in the early 1980s, and it was actually a lot of it began as childhood cancer improved their treatment and children were living longer. It became a chronic illness, and this was impacting siblings. That's where a lot of the research actually began. This was the result of this studies identified, or the original studies that started in the 80s, identified siblings as a population at risk, although they did also report some positive outcomes as well. Subsequent studies since that time have not always been consistent and are largely dependent on a variety of factors. But the general consensus is that while more studies are needed, there are both negative and positive outcomes, and that our approach and our intervention should be aimed on what we are learning from the research that we do have. So this came from the first meta-analysis. And that a meta-analysis looks at data from a number of independent studies, all on the same subject, to determine an overall trend. In this case, the subject was siblings of children with chronic illness. And they defined chronic illness as anything lasting more than 6 months. So this analysis was looking at what types of behaviors in siblings of children with chronic conditions were associated with more negative outcomes. And the results showed that when siblings responded to their brother or sister who had a chronic condition with more internal behaviors, such as anxiety and depression, versus external behaviors, such as conduct or acting out, there was a greater association with negative effects on the sibling part. Interestingly, It was not the severity of the chronic illness that was as much of a factor as how much the sibling's own life was directly affected. More siblings likely responded this way with internalizing behavior such as anxiety and depression when siblings were expected to take on more of a quasi-parent role and their caretaking role was elevated. When there was parental inattention, more time spent with the child with the condition versus the sibling, or they felt that the parent was very distracted and not really paying attention to them. And when the siblings' activities, academics, or social interactions with friends was impacted in some way. This was an observational study that strictly looked at attention deficit disorder. And this was a large UK study, and it looked at the impact of ADHD on both the parent and the sibling and how it affected health-related quality of life and happiness. And overall, the analysis showed that siblings did report lower happiness with life overall and with that family. In this observational study, they refer to another qualitative study also looking at the impact of ADHD on siblings. And they reported that siblings reported sometimes feelings of victimization when their siblings' behavior was aggressive or annoying. They talked about caretaking resentment, expectations that their parents had on them to befriend or protect their siblings, and feelings of anxiety and sorrow. Siblings describe the constant disruption to family life as chaotic, conflictual, and exhausting. So there was another review on 17 different studies, and this looked at the impact of supportive interventions, which I'll explain what they were in a minute, and how they improved the well-being and psychological functioning of siblings of children or adolescents with a chronic physical or mental illness, developmental, behavior, or learning disability. In the 17 studies, there were a total of almost 1,300 siblings, and they ranged in ages from 6 to 15. There was an equal gender balance between male and female. And the outcomes that the studies were specifically looking at was how did knowledge of their brother or sister's chronic condition impact the siblings' overall mental health and their behavior. In the studies, the supportive interventions were defined as either group-based, such as a sibling support group or a family support group, sibling training, or camps that were specifically for siblings of children with chronic conditions. The studies were conducted in Europe, Australia, Canada, and the US, and the duration of the intervention ran from 4 days to 96 months. Now, the variability in the interventions, the variability in the measures used, and the broad range of conditions was really too challenging for them to come up with a quantitative meta-analysis. However, it was concluded in the pre-post one group study design. So when they looked at one study each at a time and looked at it pre and post, the support group interventions for siblings did lead to an improvement in their knowledge about their brother-sister's illness. And this then led to an improvement in their own external and internal behavior. What was really interesting in one of the articles that was in this group of 17 articles, it was an older study that was done in the UK. And it was looking at the behavioral outcomes, again, specifically in siblings, but they focus more on learning disabilities only. But in addition to the behavior and whatnot, they looked at self-esteem as part of the outcome evaluation. And what they saw was that siblings reported in this group that they valued the feedback when in their support group, they got to write something positive about their peers in the group, and then they were able to share this in the group with everyone. The siblings were also asked to make masks and puppets of themselves and their brother and sister with the chronic disability. This masks were decorated in their masks of themselves were decorated in bright colors, and they put a lot of time into it. They were much less decorated, and much less time was put in the mask that they made of their sibling. They also reported that they did something called a feeling chart, and that was very helpful. They were asked to put their feelings about their siblings and themselves on this chart. and they were able to be honest without any kind of negative repercussion or feedback. Parents then reported in the post intervention survey that the children who took part in this particular intervention support group were overall happier afterwards. They didn't isolate as much, and they were spending more time with their sibling and seemed to have better understanding of their condition. And then the last thing that I felt was very helpful was a documentary that was done by filmmaker Rachel Fleischer. She was the mother of two children, one of which was a child with special needs. And she felt that there was not enough out there about the full impact on siblings when they had a brother or sister with a special need. So she went and interviewed siblings. And she found, and that had a variety of all kinds of conditions. And she found that there were 8 common experiences that siblings felt. So here they're listed here. So number one, the feeling that they need to be perfect. We talked about this a little bit before, and this is to help balance their parents' struggle to meet their siblings' needs. So many kids told her they felt that they couldn't make mistakes because this would add to their parents' stress level. Now, we know this is impossible, right? And that it's going to lead to more stress and anxiety, but that's what they reported they felt that they had to do. Some express the inability to express their feelings about the challenges related to that sibling. So most siblings, typically developing siblings, love their sibling that has a chronic or special need. But it's normal to resent the time that their parents have to spend with them or is taken up with the care for them. And sometimes they also reported that they wish that they could talk about how embarrassed they sometimes felt. Having a different idea of family, home, and quality time. So, for most children, the concept of family is based on togetherness. But when a sibling has any sort of special need, family quality time may look very different. They often spend time apart, either because of appointments to different places, going to the hospital, going to therapy, going to meetings. And some children feel that actually places outside the home, such as school, a relative's house, or a friend's house, feels more like a refuge for them than their own home. The feelings that their problems are minimized in comparison to their siblings' problems. Siblings often feel that the issues in their life, such as a problem with a friend or an academic struggle or anything that they might be feeling, is small compared to the problem that their brother or sisters experience. One girl that was interviewed said to the documentary filmmaker that her parents rarely dealt with her problems, instead told her to be strong. And another felt that her parents never took her problem seriously because she was considered the lucky one because she didn't have a disability. There's a feeling of isolation, self-consciousness, and uncertainty talking to friends about their sibling. Sometimes they feel lonely because they don't have the same relationship with their sibling that maybe their friends have with their brother or sister. They also feel self-conscious because they don't know how or what to tell friends. And sometimes they feel uncomfortable having friends over because they're not sure how their brother or sister may act or how their friend is going to react to it. Dealing with intolerance early and often. Children learn early that there is not universal acceptance for individual with special needs and that their sibling is sometimes not always welcomed by everyone or everywhere. They often hear unkind statements, and that is both hurtful and disappointing to them. The feeling that they're asked to do too much to help care for their sibling. So, depending on the nature of the chronic condition and the stress that's put on the family, sometimes siblings are asked to take on extra responsibilities. And whether that's for the brother or sister themselves that has a special need, or maybe helping to take care of other siblings, or to maybe do more household chores, but they feel pressure from this and they feel resentful when it interferes with their own development. And this is where a lot of the resentments comes in. And then finally, the feeling that they must grow up too quickly because of the sum of their experiences. So let's now talk about parenting strategies and interventions. So we have this clear picture now of how siblings have reported feeling, what some of the studies are showing. What can we do as parents to help with this? So you know your child better than anybody else, and you recognize when things are changing. So you want to look for these warning signs as a sign that your child may need some extra attention. Do they seem more anxious? Do they seem depressed? And depressed doesn't always come in terms of sadness. Depression can come in terms of anger, irritability. Are they more withdrawn? Are they spending more time in their room with their door closed? Are they showing angry moods, more outbursts or rebellion? Have they lost interest in friends? Have they changed their academic performance? Do you see that perfectionism, pushing too hard to achieve, pushing too hard to help, losing interest in activities that once brought them pleasure? Are they acting out in any other ways to get attention? So I suggest when you're talking to your child that you use the real estate approach. Only instead of location, 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 we want communication, communication, communication. Children tend to imagine that things can be worse than they actually are. Nothing makes a child feel more invisible than when they are not told what is happening or when they feel that their feelings are being ignored. They live in this same house as you do, and they see and they feel the stress. So we really want to encourage honesty, acknowledge their emotions and how this impacts them. Let them express their negative feelings without feeling guilty. Tell them that you know it is hard for them. Explain the situations or the changes that may be happening. Remember that content, learning about this, helps them to cope better. Younger children may not understand what is going on. So again, you want to do it in a developmentally appropriate way. Let them see your sincerity and hear your understanding. In other words, this is not a texting moment. Reassure them. You are family and families support each other even when it's not easy. And remind them always that you would do the same thing for them, that they're equally important, even if it does not always look or feel that way. Ask them, what do they need from you? Do they have any question? And again, educate them in that developmentally appropriate way about the chronic condition. There is that precious commodity called time, and all children need attention and one-on-one time with their parent or parents. And if you could make that time together meaningful and consistent, and even if it's only for 10 or 15 minutes a day, consider always their developmental stage. Younger children, it just might be something as simple as reading books together, doing a puzzle, playing together. With your adolescent or older teens, getting something to eat, driving home from school, going to their sports activities, school activities rather, find that common ground and build that connection from there. And if you are in a two-parent household, have each parent rotate. It's important that they have a deep relationship with both parents. You don't want to have one parent assigned to the sibling, one parent assigned to the child with the chronic condition. You each bring something different but equally important to your child's upbringing. Reinforce the positive. It's easy to take your child's achievements for granted when things are just naturally easier for them, or if they're not sick, or if they're not struggling. But we want to remind them how proud we are of them no matter what. We want to thank them when you notice a behavior that is beneficial to both their brother or sister or the family as a whole. And we want to have realistic expectations that these are still children, that are who's still growing and developing and have their needs as well. And definitely we want to promote equality for all. So rules of the house still are the same. Respect for parents and each other. Chores are essential for all children, okay? And you don't, in parents, you want to always have a united and unwavering team on the issue, whether you're divorced, separated, or married. The message has to be consistent. It's easy to fall into a guilt trip and let the child with the challenge get away with behavior or not having to do things that the other sibling doesn't have to do. But this is what builds the resentment, the sibling towards the parents and the sibling towards the sibling. You want to send a message also to your child that does have the challenge that you don't want to send a message that they're not capable of the task at hand or that they don't need to be accountable. Because remember always that the world outside the walls of your home is going to hold everyone accountable. Spread the support. So we really are a village, And sometimes we really have to call on our friends and our family to help us, especially when we're overwhelmed by the challenges of whatever the needs of our child. So sometimes it's healthy that maybe they can spend time with your child with a special need so that you can spend one-on-one time with your children. There's no such thing ever as too much support. And on the flip side, maybe that person, friend or family, can spend time with your other children because there's great value and self-esteem that comes to children when someone other than their parent develops a close a relationship and allows them to feel valued. As that one study showed, peer support, these interventions or camps specifically for siblings of children with a chronic learning, emotional, physical issue, they are extremely beneficial. Again, it's those shared experiences, children that are with others, children that understand what they're going through, because it's different when they're with their friends that don't have the same circumstance. But being with others that do can be very empowering for them. And things to consider on the most challenging days, because we all have these are all challenging days. And that is that positive attitudes are contagious. Positive family functioning is a protective factor. Adhering to the family routines reinforces that sense of stability and structure, that the family's okay, that these things are still going on. That's what makes children feel good. Familiarity is really important. Sense of humor, very hard some days for sure, but very paramount to parenting. So remember, it takes less effort to smile than it does to yell or get upset. And watch your children or your child grow in empathy, kindness, and tolerance. There is no better show to watch. Remember always that you have to take care of yourself. I know it sounds cliche-ish, but it's really so true. Happy moms and happy dads mean a happy home. Parents notoriously, we're not good at this, especially mothers. We just feel that we have to take care of everybody. But it really has to be mandatory. You have to take time to fill up your own gas tank because there's no alternative for it. You have to nourish your marriage or your relationship because you support each other. Whatever it is that works for you, whether it's taking a walk, going out, a night out with a friend, with your partner, reading a book, finding a hobby, renewing an old interest, reminding yourself that you are somebody outside of being a parent. Chronic stress has both physiologic and psychological impact. And a little burst of fun or relaxation does a whole lot for facing your challenges each day that are still going to be there tomorrow. Seek professional help for yourself before the crisis occurs. And just remember that if you go down, the ship's going to go down. So the last thing I'm going to talk about, which is the most positive here, is yes, there is a silver lining. We know that there's no shortcut to building character. We wish it were different because as parents, we want to do everything we can to protect our children from what is hard and from what hurts, but we can't always do that. So, what do our siblings learn from living with a brother or sister that has any sort of chronic condition? Well, they learn resilience, they learn patience, they learn emotional maturity because they have now played the game called life is unfair. They learn responsibility, independence, and it broadens their perspective. And when we think about it, aren't these all the qualities that we want them to have to be kind, caring, and emotionally strong human beings? The people that we admire most in our lives are those for their moral integrity, strength, and contribution to humanity. And most of those people didn't come to be that person without hitting a few bumps. And most likely that a majority of them are graduates of the University of Hard Knocks. This is not the deck of cards, realistically, that any of us would have picked. But with all the challenges, stress, pain, and worry, yes, the invisible sibling can thrive. We want to think about what kind of adults do we want them to become. We also want to think about what do we want our children to remember about their childhood? We set the stage as parents in our attitude and our mood and our energy. No, it's not going to be perfect every day because that's not realistic. And nobody's stage is perfect every day, but just in a general sense. We also want to say how much is about the actual chronic condition itself, or how much is it about the family itself? So, when I had the great honor to work with children with cancer and their families, the healthiest families I worked with were the ones that made the family about the family, and the cancer was not the focus of the family unit. You also, again, you want to have a realistic balance because there are more than one person in this family unit. You also want to think about, would your sibling want to emulate your parenting approach? That really makes us pause, right? Really think about, am I setting a good example? And finally, we want to remember this quote that as we are parents, each day of our lives, we make deposit in the memory banks of our children. So that's the end of the presentation. Thank you so much. Julianne, do we have any questions?
We do. We have some great questions. So I'm just going to start from the top. So
Okay.
Christine asked, we have two neurodivergent children at home. Does that change the sibling, invisible sibling dynamic at all?
I think it depends on if there's a period of time when one is getting more of the attention than the other. And if there's awareness of that, yes, I think it does. I think anytime those factors are in play where children feel that the attention is all on one sibling or all the time is being put into that sibling, then yes, I think any sibling can feel that way.
Also, how do you deal with resentment, feeling like there are different rules for um, the sibling with any sort of condition when it comes to sharing or not getting to eat just cheese for dinner like their sibling might? Um, I mean,
I think that, and that's a hard one, right? Because, and especially the younger they are, younger kids are very concrete thinkers. They're only going to see it in black and white. They get to eat what they want, I don't. So again, it's that communication in very developmental terms and explaining to them why it is the way that it is. And maybe sometimes being flexible and having some time maybe where they get to eat something just that they want to eat. But again, you just want to explain this is not just because they get to do what they want, but there's a very specific reason why that is.
how do you deal with sibling not feeling physically safe or willing to give the neurodivergent sibling more chances because of past experiences?
Yeah, that's a really tough one. Probably time. And again, it depends on the nature of what the reason was that they did not feel safe. And that's probably, and I would also recommend in that situation that if it gets to that level, that you put that child, that sibling in some sort of therapy to work through that. I don't think that's something that necessarily you as a parent can do alone. I think that's something that gets to a level that probably needs some therapy for help with that.
What are your recommendations or suggestions for single parents with multiple children?
There, oh wow,
I know
so hard,
these are
so
great
hard. I
questions.
know, and so hard. You have to draw on much support as you can from other people because realistically, it's incredibly hard to do with two parents. With one, it's just even more so that way. I mean, you're really a hero, but you have to draw on support, whether it's family, close friends, and don't be afraid to ask for it, okay? Good friends and family want to help. Sometimes they don't know how to, sometimes they feel awkward in asking, but if you ask, I think more than not, they want to be that support to you, okay? But again, remember, you need to fill up. There's only going to be so many hours, so much time in a day for you to be able to fill up and do what you need to do. So getting that extra help, whatever it is, if it's logistic help, anything that it is, you have to ask for it. You have to find it and you have to use it.
I think just to
We're
add
not good
to
at that.
that, yeah,
We're
I
not
was
good at
gonna
that. Moms.
I was gonna say, I think just to add to that, like if you don't necessarily have a village, I've found so much support through like Facebook moms groups, like truly, like I've found so much support and moms all over have just been so helpful with any sort of question. So like Karen said, it's so hard with two parents, but with one, I feel like if you don't have a village, there's people out there that are willing to help and other moms in our area. Um, so just to add,
Yeah, and that's a good point, Julianne. Look for support. There's so much on, that is one great benefit, right, of the internet. There's easy to find. There's support groups for all kinds of things, whether it's for moms of killed kids with ADHD or developmental disabilities, with any kind of medical, there's support groups. And you're going to probably get your best support from those parents because who understands better than they do what you're going through?
yeah, absolutely. We just have some comments that this is great. A reminder that I will send the recording to everybody. If anyone has any recommendations about some support groups for siblings, I know that someone mentioned that Starabin has a sibling support group. I will also do some research and look into that. Um, yeah, Karen, this was incredibly insightful. Does anyone have any last minute questions or thoughts? We can hang on for a minute if others want to type some stuff out. Yeah, again, I think we just have great presentation, very appreciated. I agree. Karen, you're wonderful.
Thanks, Julianne.
Yes, I think, again, if you have questions after the fact, you're welcome to reach out to me directly. Oh, we do have one other question. Okay. Oh, two others, so we can hang out for a second. Apologize if this was addressed earlier. I came on late. What do you suggest for adult siblings who you still feel resent you? There is a strain and distance coming from them. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at age 11, and my neurodivergence wasn't recognized or diagnosed until age 40. So this would be, how do you,
So how do you, as the sibling,
yes,
address or feeling like disconnected from your other siblings?
yes.
So I guess first of all, that number one starts with, are you at a place at all where you feel that you could even start a conversation at all? That would be the first place. Do you feel that you could? Because it's often surprising that we feel so much resentment sometimes and so many emotions about things, but when we actually sit down and start talking about something, a lot more understanding takes place. Okay. If you're not ready to maybe even initiate the conversation, if that seems too daunting, I know this sounds old fashioned, but sometimes just writing a letter or to say either I would like to have the opportunity to talk to you or putting some things down in the letter that maybe you want to say. And again, if you feel that that's something that, again, you're just not ready to do and you need some help to get to the place to do it, um, you may want to seek, some professional help on how to approach that. While also recognizing that you don't know how that sibling necessarily is feeling at this point too. But again, I always find that at the end of the day, once the talking starts, usually there's much better like understanding, especially if you own the things that maybe you felt that your behavior or something caused or whatnot. If you say maybe I was this way, but this is why, education and honesty are just, they sound really simple, but they're very, very effective and powerful.
What is your perspective on why there has not been a lot of research on the effects of growing up with a sibling who has special needs?
That's a great question. I think part of what I saw when I was looking at all of this was that they're not focusing enough on one specific. Like I said, these analyses were all on all these different types of conditions. I think it would be more beneficial if we broke it down into individual types of conditions because there's just so many variables. Um, and I think sometimes it's the tendency, it's kind of funny, isn't it? It really sets the tone. The tendency seems to be on the child itself that has the condition, right? I mean, how is their life impacted? Which of course, their life is hugely impacted. But that's why, I just don't, that's why I wanted to talk about it. I don't think that sibling is, their needs are often identified. And it takes you into, it can really put some scars that take you into your adulthood.
No, and I so appreciate you taking the time to provide the information about the research and what is out there because I feel like what you did share, even though it's not a lot out there, it was very insightful for the
Yeah,
outcome.
the outcomes were, like I said, I tried to pick the studies that gave the best suggestions for maybe things that we could do to help, like the importance of teaching our kids about the condition, the importance of putting them in some sort of a peer support group where they can really share what they're experiencing. Um, I think those things are really important. I thought the documentary was really also helpful. It's funny, right? When you ask kids to be honest, they do tell all, but that's important. We want them to do that.
Can you remind me the name of the documentary?
So there were two. One was called Social Studies, and the other one was Social Dilemma. And they looked specifically at the impact of, the documentary itself. I'm sorry, that was about you know what? I don't think she gave the name of the documentary. I have to find it and I'll send it to you. It was just this documentary that was done by the filmmaker. So I'll have to find the name of the documentary.
Okay, and we can share that with everybody.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and yes, so we will share the slides with everybody. Any information that you have about the studies, Karen, if you can share that too.
Sure. Well, you know what? The all the studies, the references are in the slides.
Okay, perfect. And yeah, I think that again, I just thank you for taking the time. And again, it's something that is just not really talked about much, but I appreciate it. This was wonderful. And thank you everyone for attending.
Yeah, thanks everybody for taking time out.
And we'll send you all the resources we can find. And please let us know of future topics. We love to do these Ask the Experts. So have a great rest of your week.
Everybody have a great day. Take care.
Bye.